Imagine it's 2:13 a.m. in Washington. Your phone lights up with three alerts. First, the US and Saudi Arabia announce a major civil nuclear cooperation milestone. Second, OPEC Plus quietly confirms oil production discipline through mid-2026. Third, policy analysts start arguing online. The US-Saudi alliance isn't breaking, it's being renegotiated. And that's the real story. For decades, the relationship was simple. America provided security. Saudi Arabia helped stabilize global oil markets. But today, the world looks very different. Regional wars, energy transitions, China's rise, and Saudi Arabia's massive Vision 2030 transformation are forcing both countries to rethink the relationships. So, in this video, we'll explain why the US-Saudi alliance is recalibrating, using the key forces reshaping it. Not a breakup, not a romance, but a strategic contract being rewritten. 1. The alliance was always transactional. The US-Saudi partnership was never about shared ideology. It was always a transaction. For decades, the deal looked like this. US, security guarantees, weapons, intelligence. Saudi Arabia, oil market stability and regional cooperation. But today, the pricing model of the alliance is changing. Washington is less willing to offer open-ended security commitments, especially ones that look like treaty guarantees. And Saudi Arabia wants something more predictable than vague promises. So instead of one giant alliance deal, the relationship is becoming modular. Defense cooperation frameworks, nuclear energy agreements, economic partnerships, regional diplomacy coordination. In other words, less blank check, more itemized cooperation. 2. Security shocks changed Saudi thinking. The turning point came in September 2019. Drone and missile attacks hit Saudi Arabia's Abqaiq oil facility, temporarily knocking out about half of Saudi oil production. The message was clear. Even the most critical energy infrastructure in the world was vulnerable. But what mattered even more was the response. Saudi Arabia realized something uncomfortable. Security guarantees always come with fine print. The US would support Saudi Arabia, but responses could be cautious, political, and constrained. That changed Saudi strategy. Instead of relying only on deterrence, Saudi Arabia began focusing on risk reduction. Examples include negotiations to end the Yemen war, restoring diplomatic ties, with Iran in 2023 prioritizing regional stability. Because missiles hitting infrastructure don't just cause damage, they scare investors. And investors are essential for Saudi Arabia's future. 3. Oil still matters. But differently. Many people say America doesn't need Saudi oil anymore. But that's misleading. Oil is priced globally, not locally. If global oil prices spike, American consumers still feel it immediately. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia still has enormous influence through OPEC+, which coordinates production levels with major exporters. At the same time, the United States has become a massive oil producer thanks to shale. U.S. production reached record levels above 13 million barrels per day in recent years. So the relationship changed. It's no longer Saudi oil, America. Instead, it's Saudi Arabia, influence over global oil markets, and that influence still matters politically and economically. 4. Vision 2030. Changed Saudi foreign policy. Saudi Arabia's biggest transformation project is Vision 2030. The goal is to build a new economy based on tourism logistics, technology, entertainment finance. The engine behind this transformation is the Public Investment Fund, a sovereign wealth fund approaching $1 trillion in assets. But here's the key point. When your national strategy depends on attracting investment, foreign policy becomes investor relations. Regional instability now threatens tourism megaprojects, infrastructure, foreign investment. So Saudi Arabia's diplomacy increasingly focuses on stability and partnerships that support economic transformation. 5. China gives Saudi Arabia options. China is now Saudi Arabia's largest trading partner. It buys huge volumes of Gulf energy and invests in infrastructure and technology. China also played a role in brokering Saudi-Iran diplomatic talks in 2023, but China's role is different from America's. China offers trade, investment, diplomatic flexibility. The United States provides military protection, intelligence integration, defense technology, security architecture. These are not interchangeable, so Saudi Arabia isn't switching sides. Instead, it's doing something much more strategic, hedging, working with both powers to maximize autonomy. 6. Israel normalization. Complicated the equation. For a while, the biggest diplomatic project in the region was expected to be Saudi-Israel normalization. The proposed grand bargain looked like this: Saudi recognition of Israel in exchange for U.S. security guarantees and nuclear cooperation. But then, the Gaza war in 2023 changed the political landscape. Saudi Arabia publicly stated that normalization would require a Palestinian state based on 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. That made the diplomatic deal far more complicated. So instead of one giant regional agreement, the relationship shifted towards smaller, separate arrangements. 7. U.S. domestic politics limits the alliance. Another key factor is American domestic politics. Even if the White House supports an agreement, major deals often require approval from Congress. That affects security guarantees, arms sales, nuclear cooperation, advanced technology transfers. So Saudi Arabia now treats U.S. commitments as politically contingent. A change in elections or congressional priorities can change policy. This pushes Saudi Arabia to diversify relationships and avoid depending on a single partner. 8. New military technology. Change the battlefield. Security threats in the region have evolved. Instead of traditional wars, many attacks now involve drones, cruise missiles, low-cost precision weapons. The problem is economic. It can cost millions of dollars to intercept a drone that costs tens of thousands to build. So Saudi Arabia needs complex layered defenses, radar networks, missile interceptors, electronic warfare, intelligence integration. And much of that architecture is deeply tied to U.S. systems and technology. That makes the partnership both essential and complicated. 9. The nuclear question. One of the most sensitive issues is civil nuclear cooperation. Saudi Arabia wants nuclear energy to diversify electricity production, reduce domestic oil consumption, develop advanced industrial capabilities, but U.S. law requires a formal 123 agreement before nuclear cooperation can occur. And the biggest disagreement concerns uranium enrichment. Saudi Arabia wants the ability to enrich uranium domestically. The U.S. worries that enrichment capability could eventually create a pathway toward weapons development. So nuclear cooperation represents both a huge opportunity for deeper partnership and a major strategic risk. Final reality, not a breakup. So what does all this mean? The U.S.-Saudi alliance isn't ending, but it is evolving. The old model was simple: security for oil. The new model is far more complex: security cooperation, energy, market coordination, investment partnerships, technology deals, nuclear negotiations, regional diplomacy. In other words, the relationship is becoming more transactional, more conditional, and more strategic. Not a breakup, but a contract renegotiation for a new geopolitical era.